Kazuha has that main pro-tag energy, and I'll tell you how to achieve such power in the next 30 seconds. Kazuha is a 5-star animo sword-wielding support who can slot into literally any situation. His grouping is intuitive and simple to use with both a press and a hold. He's incredibly cheap to build and slot effectively into teams as he works literally everywhere. He enjoys being built on sufficient EM and energy recharge. His undisputed best in slot is 4-piece Viridescent Venerer, and he's also the only Genshin character known to literally smoke weed. No wonder his value is so high. Well then, I'm Juice, and that was a spice. Now, let's get nerdy. I wonder if his weed tastes spicy. Kazuha's talents are fairly intuitive and simple. Kazuha's normal attacks deal up to 5 rapid strikes of physical damage, and his charge attack deals 2 strikes of physical damage while consuming some stamina. Basic stuff. However, when infused with animo for his skill, his plunging attack will then be converted into animo damage and create a small vortex that will suck in nearby enemies. Kazuha's elemental skill, Chihai Yabaru, has both a tap and a hold. The basics of the skill will have Kazuha leap into the air, infusing his next plunge with animo, while drawing in nearby enemies. His tap has a short 6-second cooldown, while generating 3 energy particles, and has a weaker pull than his hold, though can still be useful to trigger some quick swirls. Meanwhile, his hold causes Kazuha to charge himself up before launching into the air, which results in a strong pull, more damage being dealt, as Kazuha typically tends to deal 5 instances of damage with his skill, and a longer 9-second cooldown. It also generates 4 energy particles. His elemental burst, Kazuha Slash. Yeah, he was definitely onto something when he named that. Anyways, his burst is a cheap 60 energy cost with 15-second cooldown, which is a strong damage over time effect which will absorb the first element it comes into contact with. A pretty simple kit so far. His A1 passive, Summon Swordsmanship, will cause Kazuha to deal an additional 200% attack of the element that his skill, either tap or hold, absorbs. Elemental absorption can only occur once per use of his skill. Then the main meat of his kit, the reason why this guy will literally never die in the meta despite probably having the lungs of a chain smoker, his A4 passive. So for every point of EM that Kazuha owns, he will provide a 0.04% elemental damage bonus to the team based on the element that either his skill or burst absorbs. Once again, tap or hold doesn't matter, just the swirled element does. This damage bonus can cap out at 40%, and 2 elemental damage bonuses can coexist at the same time. A pretty digestible kit, just as digestible as some magic Matsutake, eh? Alright, I'll stop now. Actually, no promises. If there's anything people often overlook when it comes to Kazuha, it's his energy recharge requirements. To recap, his tap generates 3 particles per use, and his hold generates 4 per use. His burst cost is a cheap 60. However, most of the teams you'll be playing Kazuha in, he's typically going to serve as a solo animo, which ups his energy recharge requirements by a decent amount. Now, across most teams, 160 to 180% energy recharge is required to have Kazuha be able to burst every time it refills again. Even worse, in single target scenarios, or when playing teams of teammates that don't generate that many elemental particles, Kazuha can require an upwards of 190% energy recharge. Damn. If you're playing a more unique team where he's actually being paired alongside Venti or Sucrose, then his ER costs are knocked down to about 145 since he's not the only animo in the team anymore. This can be reduced even further if Sucrose is C1. Plus, in Raiden teams, Kazuha's ER problems are essentially resolved, and from personal experience, around 130 to 140% works just fine in such scenarios. But overall, as a benchmark, aim for 160% minimum across all teams. Kazuha is extremely flexible and can also be used anywhere and everywhere, so it's best to have him built for every situation. Also, before we continue, I'd like to offer a quick shout out to Rigel Mugli and Kuvrot. Thanks for your support. If you want a shout out in the next video, consider subscribing and leaving a cool comment down below. 4-piece Viridescent Venerer is pretty much go-to and quite frankly the only choice if you're playing a traditional support Kazuha. This set is vital for all animo support units since being able to shred the elemental resistances of enemies is an incredible damage increase, and it is always missed in teams where it is not present. It boosts his swirl firepower by a whopping 60% and unintentionally turns Kazuha into a sub-DPS. This is incredible considering he needs almost no crit investment and only needs EM and ER to function properly. Plus, this set is strong boxable, so you don't have to suffer with Maven's Beloved anymore to gain this set. There is little to no scenario where you shouldn't use this set, but that isn't to say there's literally no other way to gear this guy up. A 4-piece Thundering Fury is a goofy set that equates to an equally goofy time. This set is viable in Kazuha Overload teams or Kazuha Electro Charge teams, or what people commonly like to point to, Kazuha Dendro teams. Kazuha is capable of triggering chain reactions, so in AoE scenarios where such can occur, he's able to consistently trigger this set's passive, and use as the player, are able to go absolutely nuts. For anyone who's looking to play DPS Kazuha, you can also consider 4-piece Death for Pavilion, since it provides 15% animo damage bonus and a 40% boost to plunging attack damage, plus a little 10% of nice attack speed is also sprinkled on top as well. DPS crit Kazuha isn't by no means the optimal way to play him, though I know there are many people out there who prefer to play him in this way, and in such a case, I think this set is viable. Otherwise, just use a mix of EM and animo damage bonus sets as placeholders if you don't have a full 4-piece set for him yet, as always, and try to avoid 2-piece attack percent unless you're a crit DPS Kazuha main. In terms of substat priority, I would argue energy recharge above all until requirements are met, but elemental mastery, then crit rate in the case you're using Favonius, and then crit damage. Attack percent is also decent too. All other stats don't really matter. Kazuha has a wide arsenal of weapons at his disposal, all of which have their own little benefits to him. Freedom Sworn is his signature 5-star weapon, and the EM boost it provides tends to outperform any other weapon choice on Kazuha in terms of damage. Plus, it also boosts your team-wide damage with its passive, and is incredibly powerful in AoE situations. However, sometimes this weapon can fall off in single target scenarios. Overall, a delicious 5-star weapon with excellent value on Kazuha, just make sure you meet your ER requirements with it. Jade Cutter is a decent option for Kazuha, which can situationally outperform Freedom Sworn in single target scenarios. Do note, however, that this weapon only provides a marginal increase to Kazuha's damage on his triple EM build compared to other weapons. However, on an ADC build, this weapon can outperform all other options. Mist Splitter is another decent DPS Kazuha choice, and is a little weaker than Jade Cutter in general. It's pretty much always outperformed by Freedom Sworn, and on a triple EM build, it always performs around the same as Iron Sting. A bit of a waste on him, if you ask me. Skyward Blade can help alleviate Kazuha's ER issues, and allow you to use an EM sounds on him if you haven't built enough ER on substats alone. However, this first weapon is kind of a waste to use on him, since most 4-star energy recharge options will perform the same, or perhaps even a little better than this, quite frankly. Our beloved, craftable, free-to-play friendly option with viable refinements, Iron Sting, Kazuha's classic 4-star weapon option. A great choice for free-to-play players since it provides him with a thick amount of elemental mastery and deals solid damage, and performs on par with some of his 5-star options when built on triple EM. Easily one of Kazuha's most monumental weapons. As for Tukabu Shigure, the weapon is also pretty similar to Iron Sting in performance, while its passive isn't as good on him, but it's never free-to-play friendly option with easy refinements for the players who were still around when the weapon was available. His 4-star signature that you get from his story quest, Katsugurube Ishin, looks extremely cool and is in the meta for style points, 10 out of 10 in the looks and lore department. But in terms of actual usability, unfortunately this weapon isn't that good on him, since attack percent doesn't do much on a support Kazuha, and DPS Kazuha simply has better options. Though if you're a Kazuha main without any better DPS options, or you're in the coolness points meta, then this weapon can indeed work for you. Favonius Sword is another classic which essentially covers Kazuha's ER in 99% of the teams he's in, and has very high value refinements which have team-wide benefits. It does mean you're missing out on some free EM, but it allowing your burst up to be every time it's available is highly valuable considering how his burst saves some rotation time when it's more efficient to use over his skill. Plus, Fav. Come on guys, it's Fav. Sacrificial Sword is another option which can alleviate Kazuha's qualms with ER, and it's a pretty solid 4-star choice too. It allows you to emulate the C1 Kazuha experience by providing an extra skill proc every time the weapon's passive procs, which increases Kazuha's personal damage and his generation of energy, though in turn, he unfortunately takes up more field time, which can extend rotations uncomfortably. Plus, it can be a little unreliable at lower refinements as well. I'd personally just recommend Fav over this option. The Dark Iron Sword is Kazuha's best 3-star option, as it provides him with EM and only falls 5% behind Iron Sting in terms of performance, which is pretty nice. It's cheap to level up, and if you have no spare sword builds, then this weapon is a fantastic substitute for free-to-play players. Also, in my opinion, it has very high style points, since it looks cool. However, the passive requires you to play Kazuha in electro-based teams, and if you don't trigger the weapon's passive, then it falls behind Iron Sting by around 9% instead. Plus, it offers just a smidge less EM than Iron Sting, which means a tiny bit less utility coming from Kazuha. However, it's still an excellent option for those who have no gacha-based options available and want to hold on to their sword billets. Now, last, but definitely not least, my favorite Kazuha weapon, Zephos' Moonlight. I have a myriad of reasons for falling completely in love with this weapon. First off, it's able to cover both EM and ER at the same time with its passive, and when you refine this weapon even once, the returns are huge in terms of value. The fact that this weapon can provide team-wide ER is fantastic considering how good he is in teams like International and Raiden Hypercarry, areas where I commonly use him, and is able to provide additional stats to characters who really appreciate this sort of buff. For example, if you have a 4-piece emblem user on the team, Zephos is indirectly helping said unit deal more damage and have a more comfortable rotations. Yes, it is a gacha 4-star weapon, but I've been using it at R1 ever since release, and it's made playing Kazuha so much more comfortable. You're also able to build triple EM on him while still having enough ER for the majority of your teams, which is super handy when gearing him out. Overall, Overall, while Freedom Sworn is his undeniable best in slot, I would argue that Zephos trumps out Iron Sting any day, and at higher refinements can easily challenge Fab's throne. You know what? Zephos' Moonlight is my husbando. We're in the weapon simping era, ladies and gentlemen. Thing with Kazuha is that he works literally everywhere. It isn't bold to state that in pretty much any team that isn't a Geo team, you can use Kazuha. I'll go over all the notable archetypes that Kazuha can fit into, and then some notable teams in general where Kazuha can thrive. First off, the classic and arguably Kazuha's best team placement, International. He's fantastic here, being the tried and true option for many players. International is the best team in the game, and has been ever since the simple formula of Child Bennett and Xiangling was formed, and Kazuha synergizes excellent here, as pulling off a double swirl of Kazuha is much simpler in this team than it is with Sucrose, and if you hyper invest and get your Kazuha to C2, International's damage increases by a whole 15%. That's insane. His ability to work excellently in AoE and single target has proven him to be highly formidable in this equally flexible team, and overall I'd say if you have the units, then this is the undisputed best place to use Kazuha. You can also just generally play national variants of Kazuha as well, though I just recommend the Child variant, first and foremost because Child is super hot, and secondly because this is literally the best possible team you can form with him. Then there's Raiden Hypercarry. Sucrose does little to nothing for a team where Electro is the sole source of damage, and Kazuha's damage bonus percent from his A4 passive is excellent value here. Plus when Kazuha stands inside Bennett's circle, he self-infuses himself with Pyro, and since Pyro takes priority over all other elements when it comes to Kazuha's swirling system, Kazuha's burst DOTs will proc powerful overloads. This is especially excellent in boss scenarios, and Kazuha is also easily able to comfortably run weapons like Iron Sting and Freedom Sworn in these teams, since Raiden provides so much ER. Then Freeze teams. He is good in pretty much all of them, and once again, Sucrose's EM buff here is essentially futile. I personally recommend playing him with Ayaka, since best girl Venti is better suited to second best girl Ganyu. Ayaka benefits excellently with Kazuha's damage bonus percent, and he still has a place within Ganyu Freeze if you play him with her. Bo is just slightly less synergistic. Only issue is that his plunges can unfortunately break freezes, which can make him a little more convenient overall mono cryo teams, or Sucrose is also dead meat. Not to mention Melt Ganyu. Like I said earlier, Kazuha self-infuses with Pyro when standing inside Bennett's burst. His burst DOTs will then apply Pyro and then take the place of Xiangling in a traditional Melt Ganyu team. You can also replace Xiangling with Nihida to form Burning Melt, a Ganyu team where Ganyu capitalizes on being able to use her burst since a constant burning aura is being upkept. Kazuha's Pyro-infused burst contributes to this. As a Ganyu main, I've tried this out a couple of times, and I'd say it's pretty decent if you can maintain survivability. He's also the best in slot choice for Kaching Aggravate, easily Kaching's strongest Dendro-based team. Since Aggravate appreciates crit damage-based stats, Kazuha provides plenty of damage bonus percent for Kaching to capitalize on and helps shred electro resistances in general. Plus, this also aids Fischl, who is typically played alongside Kaching and Aggravate teams for her A4 passive. Not to mention, he has some flexible positions in Alhai from spread teams too, and can fit into almost any Hyper Bloom team. He can either carry a Hyper Bloom himself, for example, just go and try Kazuha, Barbara, Dendro main character, and Kuki with minimal investment and then thank me later, or existing Hyper Bloom teams, like the Nihito Shingcho EM Raiden Core, for example. You can also slot him into majority of version teams as a flex slot. Do know that his damage bonus percent is honestly best enjoyed in Quicken based teams, since that's where his stat is enjoyed best. At C2, however, his value in Dendro teams skyrockets across the board in general. He's still extremely competent at C0 in a majority of Dendro teams, however, and his skill being able to interact with cores and draw them into himself is an excellent quality. However, I do advise against playing him in Bloom teams due to Nilou having an extreme fear of anyone who isn't wet or smells like grass. Well, Kazuha probably does smell like grass, just not the Dendro kind. Even without Nilou, most Bloom teams are already full of Dendro and Hydra units who can easily fill the spots of their respective teams and typically don't require any damage bonus percent, since Bloom teams tend to have low personal damage in exchange for high Bloom core damage. Kazuha can also be tagged onto the end of a Hu Tao double Hydra team to increase the team's Hydra output and provide a little bit of extra crowd control, and from personal experience as a Hu Tao main, I really enjoy this setup when I have enough survivability. Against Constipated Beast, however, I'd recommend sticking to Zhongli for the sake of your sanity. You can also play VV Vape with Kazuha, which is very strong, especially at C2, though at C0, Sucrose can do pretty much the same thing as him, if not better, in this particular team. There's also a unique scenario where if you have a C0 Yalan and you're playing a setup of Hu Tao, C0 Yalan, Kazuha, and C4 Yanfei, or LG Amber, swirling Hydro on his burst will cause Hydro DOTs to occur and continuously apply Hydro on enemies. This can actually cause Hu Tao to have enough Hydro application to vaporize every hit within Kazuha's burst AoE. The main downside to this is that you have to stay within the burst AoE, and once Hu Tao's skill outlives the burst duration, you'll be back to not having sufficient enough Hydro application again with the C0 Yalan. And now, a Kazuha Venti femboy duo is not only a wet dream, but is also a dream to play in AoE, since you compare pretty much any two elements on the side that aren't Geo, and this team will steamroll. I can say for certain that Venti steamrolls my pickle. Plus, more niche teams like Klee, Monopyro also appreciate Kazuha's damage bonus percent since Sucrose's EM is void and a reactionless team. All in all, use him literally anywhere you can think of it isn't a Geo team and he'll work. He'll just somehow magically boost your team's damage output, I promise you. So, Kazuha applies 1 unit of Animo on his skill tap, though with his hold, he applies a strong 2 units of Animo. His skill has also absolutely no ICD, this includes his plunges. His burst on the other hand applies 1 unit of Animo per burst DOT and features a standard ICD. At C6 you can perform normal and charge attacks infused with Animo, all of which feature standard ICD. In terms of reactions, this can help him swirl multiple elements at once and provide multiple elemental damage bonuses to many different teammates, such as double swirling and international, or taking advantage of how Hydro and Electro coexist in Electrocharge and Hyperbloom teams. Kazuha lives on a boat, so of course he's going to attract whales when he's out on the ocean. And whales, you'll be very pleased to hear what I'm about to say. Pretty nice little C1, which can reduce the amount of ER your Kazuha needs to run. The do note that this runs into a similar issue akin to the Sacrificial Sword, where Kazuha ends up spending too much time on field and extending your rotation time. Not a bad C1, however, and this is simply the calm before the oncoming storm. Kazuha's best constellation in my opinion, it's excellent for both low spenders and whales alike, since it's such a high value early constellation and improves his performance across so many teams. Plus, it increasing his own EM makes ER simpler to build on him, and also helps reach that cap of 40% damage bonus provisioned to his teammates. This is a direct increase to all of his reaction-based teams, and the fact this makes him easier to build as a whole also increases his value in non-reaction based teams. A beastly constellation, and one of which I absolutely recommend wholeheartedly if you can get your hands on it reasonably. I'd recommend stopping here if you're free to play or low spender. Pretty basic con, really nothing much. This constellation is pretty nice for alleviating his ER cost, especially when the first part of it can pair pretty well with the C1 to drastically ease up his ER issues. However, the gliding part is quite niche and not really useful in combat, though it's a nice little bonus to clutch onto. Overall, a very nice con that's fairly synergistic with his kit, but has a nice bonus tagged onto the end of it. Once again, a fairly basic con that doesn't do much for his kit overall, but it's nice that it's there. This constellation is truly a feast for whales. It unlocks a whole other side of his character, truly allowing him to tap into his potential as a main DPS unit. Suddenly, crit stats aren't so absurd to build upon him anymore, and his previous cons have all had excellent cohesion up until this point. Even so, EM is still highly valuable in Kazuha, seeing as he gets a direct damage increase from it, and overall for a niche whale con, I say this is excellent. It capitalizes on what the character can do, while still providing a unique experience to those of you willing to go this far for him. Really neat stuff. In my opinion, his C2 has aged really well with the rise of the Dendro meta, and will only continue to be a fantastic constellation as time goes on. His C6 is an incredible gimmick for whales to play around with, while having some serious merit to it. And he doesn't have any truly wasted cons, aside from perhaps his talent upgrades, which end up culminating nicely anyways when you reach C6. Definitely pick up C2 if you can. It's an absolute game changer. This man is on drugs for more reason than one, and hopefully this guide was able to help you perfect your blade and truly reach his highest potential. Okay, I'm seriously done now. Either way, this has been Juice, signing out, and I'm wishing you all a day as calm as Kazuha's gentle tune.